What if the Spice Girls were Riot Grrrl punk rockers? Find out on this week's What If, How, When, Why. Hello, my name is Morgan Brown. For the past few months now, I've been making a series of videos that I call What If videos. Each week I take a different popular song and imagine an alternative universe in which a decision that someone's made or a different set of circumstances cause that song to come out completely different from the version that we know and love. I then take the original lead vocal of that song and record a new backing track to it using just GarageBand and whatever instruments I have to hand in order to try and create that alternative version and bring it to life. So this week the song I took on was Wannabe by the Spice Girls, and I attempted to turn that into a Riot Grrrl punk rock song. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, here's a little taster.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I wanna really, really, really wanna take it. If you wanna be my lover, you gotta get with my friends. Make it last forever. Friendship never ends. If you wanna be my lover, you have got to give. Taking is too easy, but that's the way it is. What you think about that? Now you know how I feel. Say you can handle my love. Are you for real? I won't be hasty. I'll give you a try. If you really bug me, then I'll say goodbye.
The Spice Girls, it's funny really, they've become such a part of the cultural makeup now. It's kind of hard to imagine a time before them in a way. Actually like a fairly short-lived phenomenon in terms of their run as a band, but they've packed a lot into that time and definitely changed the face of pop. Before they landed on the pop scene like a bombshell in 1996, there was definitely quite a long period of boy band dominance, going back at least to the rise of New Kids on the Block. And there were female groups, but they tended to be very much more in the kind of serious R&B mode. I'm thinking of people like Eternal, who were definitely trying to mimic the US R&B vocal groups like En Vogue and the like. And to think of an all-female, specifically pop group, you'd probably have to go back to Bananarama, who were massive in the 80s, but by that point in the 90s, although they've never really stopped going, they'd very much fallen off in terms of chart success. So the Spice Girls represented a pretty seismic change in that respect. Also, just the way they were marketed was pretty remarkable. A lot of the boy bands certainly would all be dressed in fairly uniform outfits, have a single image that they all shared, whereas the Spice Girls, having this band of 5 really distinct personalities who all had their own easily recognizable mode of dress, that was really a very clever bit of marketing and something that I don't think I'd seen done before. I guess other bands that have been really kind of big pop sensations, you'd particularly think of the Beatles, and the Beatles were maybe the first pop band where their personalities were really widely known and everyone latched onto a particular favourite one. George is the quiet one, John's the sarcastic one, etc. With the Spice Girls, I guess rather than letting people discover those individual personalities and discerning them for themselves, they kind of writ them large across the group so that they were right in your face from the moment you saw them. In many respects, there's nothing particularly revolutionary about them musically or in terms of any kind of statement they were making. I mean, the music, there were some good songs, definitely. There was up-tempo, poppy, bright, some really contemporary sounding dance pop bits, but then things that hark back to Motown and kind of classic 60s pop and R&B as well, but nothing that really broke the mold. I think it seemed like they were making some kind of incredibly bold statement at the time, just because it was a collection of brash personalities. They were all female. It was a big statement of empowerment. But when you actually look at it any closer, it was all pretty safe. Quite a lot of the kind of female positive sloganeering aspect of the band was something that I think was quite consciously co-opted from Riot Grrrl, and then very much had all the edges sanded off until it couldn't possibly upset anyone. It's gone from Riot Grrrl's radical manifestos to a matter of making the peace sign and saying girl power. Interestingly, the Spice Girls weren't the first chart pop band to throw around the slogan girl power. That would be Shampoo. I don't know if you remember Shampoo. They were pretty great, actually. Just a duo. Their biggest hit was a song called Trouble, which is a bit of a pop classic. It's like a kind of female teenage take on like early Beastie Boys rock rap kind of thing. Loads of sulky, bratty I think the girls in the band were actually like the presidents of the Manic Street Preachers fan club at the time. I could be wrong. wrong, but that's something I remember reading. And then their second single, I think it was their second single, was called Girl Power, and it's this pop anthem that actually references the Riot Grrrl movement in the lyrics as well. But I think just because it was an act made up with these two quite alternative, sulky indie girls, they were never going to have the widespread appeal that the Spice Girls were carefully manufactured to have. But yeah, although neither the music or the message in themselves of the Spice Girls were particularly radical when you actually examined them, they certainly must have had a massive impact just in terms of actually hearing more female voices and just seeing a really strong female presence in these kind of pop culture spaces that had been largely taken up by men before. So definitely an important act, and you can certainly bet that a whole generation of female performers who were just getting into pop music at the time that they hit that band and those records and that image and that message, however diluted it might have been, must have had a massive impact. Now, the Riot Grrrl movement certainly didn't reach anywhere near as many people as the Spice Girls did, but those people it did reach, I think it's fairly safe to say that an awful lot of them were probably pretty much changed forever. You're not familiar with Riot Grrrl. It's a feminist punk movement that I guess grew out of late 80s zine culture a lot, and then sort of started to emerge in the early 90s on both coasts of America, and then also a parallel movement in the UK. I guess a lot of the punk scene through the 80s was still very much a boys' club, could be a really misogynist space, quite often quite unsafe for women as well. There were definitely, obviously, pioneers who ploughed a way through that in spite of all the hostility. And obviously, in the UK, the Slits, Polystyrene of X-ray Specs, the Raincoats. In the US, I mean, you can go all the way back to Patti Smith, Deborah Harry, and then like Joan Jett, people like Exene Cervenka from X. So there were definitely female role models in punk, but they were pretty much swamped by just dudes everywhere who could often be quite hostile to women trying to take up any kind of space in that environment. So as the 80s go on, you get this zine culture, fairly kind of furious, radical feminist zines kind of critiquing this environment that's been created in punk rock. And out of that, you start to get people forming bands, inspired also by some of the more radical bands that were coming up at the time. Fugazi and Nation of the Ulysses as well, with their radical manifestos, would have been a big inspiration. So you get the likes of Bikini Kill, Bratmobile, Slant Six, who are all explicitly feminist punk rock bands playing this kind of raw, urgent, angry, sarcastic, snarky, kind of garagey music, which becomes kind of the template for Riot Grrrl. I should say, Riot Grrrl's a funny movement in the sense that even the name's disputed. A lot of people don't like it. I think some people consider the use of girl to be reductive. Not everyone who's considered to be a part of the Riot Grrrl movement acknowledges that Riot Grrrl's a thing. So I know it's a problematic term. I'm just using it because generally if you say Riot Grrrl, people have at least an idea of what you mean. Also, stylistically, there was never an exact Riot Grrrl sound. I tend to think of fairly lo-fi, urgent, kind of garagey punk, but there are some people who'll include more feminist-leaning grunge acts like Hole or Babes in Toyland, and will claim that they're part of Riot Grrrl. Some people will include feminist-leaning punk bands from a little earlier like Frightwig. Some people will include slightly punky indie pop bands around the same time, and there was quite a lot of crossover between all of these scenes, so that there are definitely grey areas on all sides of Riot Grrrl. But for the sake of the argument, what I'm talking about is that specifically feminist, specifically punk rock, lo-fi, garagey kind of music that we associate with Bikini Kill, Emily Sassy Lime, and then in the UK, the scene that grew up around like Huggy Bear, Skin Teen, Mambo Taxi, the Voodoo Queens, Linus, those kinds of bands. Aside from musical similarities and differences, the important thing that obviously unified all of the Riot Grrrl bands, or whatever you want to call them, was a pretty radical feminist outlook, this furious determination to change the punk scene and change society really as well. So a lot of people writing manifestos about how things need to be, active movements to encourage female participation, girls to the front at gigs, just forcing that space to exist for women to be able to participate and thrive in these previously kind of male-centric environments. Coupled with a real DIY ethic, there was no corporate involvement in the scene at all, which is probably one of the reasons why it never really kind of burst fully into the mainstream, apart from in relatively diluted ways. Also, pretty much as soon as any of these bands started to get any attention, there was pretty instantaneous backlash in the music press, which was terribly misogynist. Continues to be now, but I think even worse then. Where Riot Grrrl was covered, it was quite often just people trashing bands' musical abilities, questioning their ethics, just finding ways to tear these bands down. So I think particularly higher profile bands like Bikini Kill found themselves under tremendous amount of scrutiny, which must have really made it so hard to continue as a band. So a lot of that first wave of bands were fairly short-lived. However, what they'd set in motion continued. So after that first wave, you get a new generation of bands coming through within a couple of years. So bands like Slate the Kinney, who were formed by Carrie Brownstein, who'd been in Excuse 17, and Corin Tucker, who'd been in Heavens to Betsy, and who went on to take Riot Grrrl type music to a much wider audience. You get Kathleen Hanna of Bikini Kill resurfacing in Le Tigre, who took the politics and the style and ethics of Riot Grrrl and applied it to this great catchy lo-fi electronica. You get The Gossip, who started out as this kind of radical lo-fi blues punk outfit and then became a dancey post-punk act, and again achieved quite a level of mainstream success that you wouldn't have thought that a Riot Grrrl type band could have achieved just a few years earlier. And around those bands, you also get Lady Fest, the first one of which was in Olympia, Washington in 2000. But then after that, similar events began springing up everywhere, all over the world, and for the next several years. And I think you still see the continuation of that culture at work today. I should say as well, you might be sitting here watching this thinking, Riot Grrrl's all well and good, but why on earth is this dude telling me about it? Shouldn't there be a woman doing this? I completely agree. And there are definitely YouTube channels out there with women talking about this stuff, so go and watch those. They're going to be awesome. I would just say I'm not a complete outsider to this. I've been playing in bands for many years now, but my introduction to sort of seriously playing in bands was through this kind of post-Riot Grrrl scene. When I was at university, I started a band called Flamingo 50 with my friends Louise and Karen, and that was the first band I was in that got to make records and go on tour, and all of the circles we were moving in were very much this kind of totally DIY, totally feminist scene that sprang up out of Riot Grrrl. We got to play with bands like Le Tigre and The Gossip, which was amazing. We played Ladyfest Glasgow, which was the first European Ladyfest, and then did London the year after, and Bristol and Manchester the year after that. So was very much involved in all this. Totally amazing scene, and I think pretty much kind of shaped who I am today. I don't know if I'd have the same values, the same outlook on life that I have if I hadn't been involved in that scene. So pretty great time. I made a little playlist actually of that band Flamingo 50 on my channel if you want to check any of that stuff out. It's got our 2 music videos that we made, plus some various live bits, and a recording of John Peel playing our single on Radio 1 as well, which is pretty exciting. So check that out if you feel that way inclined. So yeah, my thought with the scenario for this week's video was people behind marketing the Spice Girls took elements of Riot Grrrl and watered them down to make them safe for mass consumption. But what if in the early days of the Spice Girls they'd explained, oh yeah, we're going to combine in some elements of this thing called Riot Grrrl, and the members of the band had gone, oh, Riot Grrrl, what's that? And then having discovered it, liked it so much that they wanted to pursue that rather than chart pop. So if you read my little story down in the description there, the Spice Girls original management, Heart Management, had explained about, oh yeah, we're going to use this girl power sloganeering that comes from Riot Grrrl, and they show them as an example a video of Huggy Bear on The Word, which if you've not seen it, definitely check that out. That's an amazing clip. So the Spice Girls are watching this, they're thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. And at that point just decide, yeah, we're dropping this pop thing. This is what we want to do. So they just go off, pick up instruments. Instead of becoming this popular chart act, they become underground indie darlings. And so the version of Wannabe that I've created is meant to be the one that they make for their little demo tape that's traded around in these Riot Grrrl circles. So as ever with these things, I started by just taking the original vocal and just syncing it up to the grid on GarageBand. It's already pretty up tempo, but I wanted to make sure there was loads of energy to this, so I did crank up the tempo a little bit. Then I programmed some drums in, and what I normally do is play the drums in on my MIDI keyboard and then spend quite a long time tidying it up to make sure everything's in time and nice and tight. With this, because I wanted that raw spontaneity, I did almost no tidying up, so I pretty much left it just as I played it in. And I did that with all the tracks. I just didn't spend a lot of time editing. I kept everything kind of raw and noisy. So pop some bass on there next, cranked up the gain on the virtual bass amp to make it nice and growly. And then there's two guitar tracks that are playing various kind of chordal voicings with really gnarly guitar sounds on. It still wasn't quite noisy enough, so I added another two tracks, one on each side, with just feedback and noise. And then over the choruses, apart from the first one, I popped on a cheap sounding 60s organ as well, just playing a little melody. That's the thing I've heard on some Riot Grrrl records. I know that the later Bratmobile LPs have quite a lot of Barfisa kind of organ stuff on, which always sounds really cool. So I thought I'd do a bit of that. And there wasn't much else to it this week. I kept everything pretty simple. The noise guitars move up and play a little kind of high melodic thing that harmonizes with the keyboard over the out chorus. And then I just piled loads of overdrive on everything because I wanted to get that kind of overloaded tape sound that you get on quite a lot of early Riot Grrrl records. I'm thinking of things like Bikini Kill's Revolution Girl Style Now tape and the split with Huggy Bear as well. I think all of that was just recorded on 4-track, so always really blown out, raw sounding stuff. And that's what I wanted to capture. Then for the video, took a couple of clips of the Spice Girls from Top of the Pops and spliced them in with some footage of the Voodoo Queens, great UK Riot Grrrl band, and then added in my usual mock-up posters. I had loads of fun coming up with some of those because there's a lot of really cool Riot Grrrl poster art out there, so co-opted a little bit of that and crowbarred Spice Girls logos in. So hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and if there's anything else you'd like me to do in coming weeks, any songs you'd like me to try, any artists you'd like me to take a look at, or any genres you'd like me to have a go at, I'm always keen to have a go at those. But yeah, if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, check out my other videos as well, and otherwise that's me for this week, so we'll see you next time.